Okay, so buckle up because we are diving deep into the granddaddy of all D&D settings, Greyhawk.
Greyhawk.
You got it. We've got excerpts from why the World of Greyhawk is the greatest campaign.
Okay.
And we've got, alongside that, some choice cuts from the World of Greyhawk itself.
Nice.
So let's dig in and figure out why this classic setting still reigns supreme, even for gamers today in 2024.
Yeah, what I think is so fascinating about Greyhawk is how it manages to be both like deeply nostalgic, but then also like shockingly relevant.
Right.
It's like if you were to dig out your, your favorite fantasy novel from when you were a kid, and you reread it and you're like, wow, this actually holds up. This is good.
Yeah, it's comfort food, but for dungeon masters.
Yes.
And this document's first point actually touches on that a little bit. It says naturalist setting. And that's one of the things that makes it so great. It's almost like D&D's version of alternate history, wouldn't you say?
Totally. I mean, Greyhawk, what they do is they draw inspiration from medieval Europe, but they inject this dose of fantastical realism into it. So like you look at like Furiondi and Keoland, right?
Right.
And they mirror these like real world kingdoms, right, with their own, political intrigue and power struggles.
Right.
But then on top of that, you have magic and mythical beasts and ancient curses. And all of a sudden, it's like you're not just studying history, you're living in it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what hooks you, right?
Totally.
Is that it's immersive because it feels grounded.
Yeah.
Even though they're, owlbears roaming around.
It's all over.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But let's talk about those pulp fantasy archetypes
Okay.
that the source material brings up. This is where I think that Greyhawk goes like full on Conan the Barbarian.
Absolutely. Like if you want that like classic, that like sword and sorcery vibe,
Yeah.
like you want cunning thieves guilds.
Right.
Greyhawk's got you covered, with the Shadow Thieves of Irenicus.
Yes.
If you want, barbaric hordes, constantly causing trouble, you got the Pommarge. Like it's just this playground of classic fantasy tropes, and it's ready for you to explore them.
Yeah, and it delivers on those tropes too, like in spades. I mean, you've got characters like Mordenkainen, Tensor, Rary. I mean, these are names that are synonymous with D&D magic.
Right.
Every time somebody casts Tensor's floating disc, they are invoking Greyhawk's legacy.
It's true.
It's like these figures are woven into the fabric of the game itself.
Exactly. It's like you're not just casting a spell, you're like tapping into like a shared history.
Right.
And speaking of like legendary figures, we got to talk about the Darlene maps.
Oh, yeah.
Which are, for those who don't know, they're practically artifacts.
They're legendary.
Underworld.
They really are. And if you look at those maps, they are so intricate and beautifully detailed. I mean, if those don't make someone want to just dive in and get lost in a campaign, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
They're iconic for a reason. But here's the thing, though. They're not about dictating every single detail.
That's what's so cool about them, is that they don't, right? They spark your imagination instead of like limiting it. They're like, here's some coastlines, here's some forests, here's some mountain ranges, a scattering of towns and dungeons, like just enough to get your creative juices flowing. Yeah. And the rest is up to you.
It's like they handed you a hand-drawn map, and they put "Here be dragons" across all the parts that are unexplored, and said, "Go make your own legends."
Exactly.
And speaking of making your own legends, the document brings up another one of Greyhawk's strengths, which I think is really cool. It's the lack of uber NPCs, right?
Yes.
It's a true sandbox setting.
It is. Your players are not railroaded into someone else's like epic destiny, They have the freedom to become heroes on their own terms. Well, it's their choices, their actions that shape the fate of the world.
No pre-written, chosen one narrative shoved in your face.
Exactly.
Right. But it's not like, Greyhawk is devoid of powerful figures.
Of course.
It handles them differently.
It does, yeah. Like you take Mordenkainen, for example, right?
Right.
Legendary archmage, pillar of the Greyhawk world.
Right.
But he's not waiting in his tower to hand out quests to low-level adventurers.
Right.
He's out there, he's out there living his life, battling ancient evils, advancing his arcane knowledge.
Yeah.
Your players might cross paths with him, maybe even, earn his respect.
Right.
But he's not there to steal their spotlight.
Yeah, it makes those encounters even more meaningful when they do happen, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of meaningful encounters, we got to talk about the modules.
The modules.
The Greyhawk modules, I mean, they are legendary for a reason.
They're so good.
They really are.
And they did such a good job of expanding on Greyhawk organically.
Right.
You know, like you look at Against the Giants, for example.
Right.
It's this classic campaign where you throw your party up against hill giants and then stone giants and then finally the terrifying frost giants.
Right.
And each encounter, each dungeon feels like it's just a natural extension of this already, well-defined setting.
And let's not forget the Temple of Elemental Evil. I mean,
oh, man.
that practically defined the term mega dungeon in D&D.
Sure.
But even some of the smaller modules like White Plume Mountain or the infamous Tomb of Horrors added to Greyhawk's like mystique.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I mean, they gave dungeon masters all of the tools that they needed to take the bones of this world and really flesh it out and make it their own.
And you see that Greyhawk influence everywhere, like even in the core rule books, right? Like remember that first time you stumbled upon Leomund's tiny hut?
Oh, yeah?
That spell, my friend, comes straight from the mind of a Greyhawk wizard.
It's true. It's almost like they couldn't resist weaving in those little Greyhawk Easter eggs throughout all of D&D.
Totally.
And speaking of weaving things in, this document brings up this interesting point about the year 576 CY.
Okay.
Being like a fixed point in Greyhawk's timeline.
Right.
What's that all about?
Yeah. So that date is really interesting because it essentially acts as like an anchor point.
Okay.
So, the source material provides all this information, it gives you like a snapshot of Greyhawk in 576 CY, like the political climate, who the major players are, what conflicts are brewing.
Okay.
But it's just that. It's a snapshot. It's a point in time. Dungeon masters are free to decide how the world has evolved since then.
So it's not like this is what happened and then this is what happened and this is what's going to happen.
Exactly.
It's more like this is what's happening.
It's a living, breathing world.
Right.
Things change, Yeah. It adapts based on the stories you tell.
So they give you a solid foundation.
Yes.
Right? A history, a geography, a vibrant culture, but it's a living, breathing world.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so enduring, It embraces that core principle of D&D, which is, create your own adventures. Let your imagination run wild.
Right.
It gives you a framework that feels both familiar and full of like unexplored potential.
It's like they gave you the keys to a fully furnished mansion and said, all right, you can have a party here. You can rearrange the furniture. You can even like add a wing onto this place if you want to. It's yours. Go wild.
Yeah, make it your own.
So for those listening who are maybe thinking, okay, Greyhawk, it's it's cool, it's this like classic setting, but like why should I care in 2024? Why is this relevant to me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Greyhawk is like this treasure trove of inspiration for anyone who loves D&D. Really, no matter like how much experience you have with it, like think about it. All those classic modules we were talking about, those aren't just like dusty relics of the past,
Right.
They're brimming with like ingenious encounters, memorable NPCs, clever dungeon designs.
Right.
That honestly, like a lot of them hold up even today.
Yeah, if you haven't cracked open like White Plume Mountain or Tomb of Horrors in a while,
do it.
I mean, those modules will remind you why you fell in love with D&D in the first place.
Absolutely. And even beyond like, the mechanics, the maps, Greyhawk, it embodies the spirit of like pure, unadulterated creativity. You know what I mean? Like it reminds us that D&D at its heart is about collaboration and imagination and the thrill of exploring a world where anything is possible.
Yeah. And that is a powerful thing to tap into, right?
Totally.
So as you're getting ready for your next campaign, think about it. What if you borrowed a page from Greyhawk's book, right?
Okay.
Imagine a world where the fate of nations doesn't hinge on some, preordained chosen one, right?
Right.
But it hinges on the choices your players make.
Yeah.
The allies that they forge and the challenges that they overcome.
Yeah, rediscover that sense of wonder, right?
Yeah.
That made you so passionate about tabletop role-playing in the first place. And who knows, maybe your next Greyhawk campaign will be the one that inspires, a whole new generation of gamers. Because in the world of Greyhawk, just like D&D itself, the adventure never really ends.
That's the beauty of it.